Paul stood at the rural bus station. His eyes stayed locked on the direction the bus was coming from. Suddenly the door opened. He saw the familiar smile on his wife's face. But right behind her, there were 3 young boys. They were his grandsons whom he had never met. His wife just began to explain, but Paul's face already darkened. He snatched the canvas bag from her shoulder, turned around, and walked away. His back stood straight and firm, leaving no room for anyone to stop him. Among the 3 grandsons, the oldest Ray had light brown dyed hair. A silver earring hung from his ear, and he carried an air of rebellion. Ader always held his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, as if the real world had nothing to do with him. The youngest Theo was as quiet as a shadow. His clear eyes held timid curiosity, but he never said a word. No one knew. He was a deaf-mute child. Along the way, the air inside the car felt extremely tense. The veins on Paul's hand bulged as he gripped the steering wheel. In the backseat, the 3 boys exchanged looks. This place was way too run down. There was not even a signal. Ader finally could not hold back and complained. Ray nodded in agreement. Theo tugged lightly on Ader's sleeve, telling him to keep his voice down. Paul pretended he did not hear, but his grip on the wheel became even tighter. What he disliked was not the boys' complaints, but his daughter's selfishness. 17 years ago, for the sake of so-called love, she ignored his objections and left without hesitation. After that, she disappeared completely. Now her marriage fell apart. She had no time to take care of the kids, so she remembered him, the father she had abandoned, and made him take on 3 burdens out of nowhere. The car finally drove deep into the mountains. A stone house appeared ahead. This was the home Paul and his wife had lived in for decades. When they got out, Ader stepped onto the soft, muddy ground, and immediately frowned. He tiptoed carefully, afraid of dirtying his brand-new sneakers, his heart filled with defiance. They walked into the house. The simple furniture and vintage decorations clashed with the city life the kids were used to. Ader kept searching for a signal, sliding on his phone screen repeatedly, muttering that it was over. They were completely cut off from the world. Ray leaned against the door frame, looking around the simple house, his eyes full of open disdain. Theo was attracted by the chickens in the yard. At dinner that night, a small conflict broke out. Paul's wife brought out her signature eggplant beef stew. The smell filled the room. Paul picked up a piece of beef for Theo, but Theo shook his head, pointed at the vegetables on the plate. He thought cows were gentle and should not be eaten. Paul froze for a moment, then explained with a smile. This cow was not gentle at all. It used to bully other calves, and even kicked over the trough on purpose. It was a bad cow, so that was why they ate it. Theo looked at Paul, then at the beef, and finally picked up his fork. When it was Ray's turn, she waved her hand. I do not eat beef. Paul ignored what he saw as her fussiness, and continued eating. Ader took one bite of the beef, then suddenly frowned. He spit the meat out. What was that taste? It was terrible. He grabbed some fruit, and ate it instead. Paul watched his 3 picky grandsons. The frustration inside him grew again, but his wife tugged gently at his sleeve, telling him not to argue with the kids. When the kids finished eating and left the table, Paul could not help complaining. Look at them, all spoiled. How are we supposed to survive these 2 months? His wife sighed. The kids were going through a lot too. Their parents' divorce hit them hard. We should be more patient. Paul said nothing. He knew his wife was right, but 17 years of resentment could not be erased so easily. In the following days, the conflicts between the grandfather and the children continued to escalate. Early the next morning, Ader dragged a long data cable and placed his phone in the spot in the yard with the best signal to get online. When Paul saw it, he walked over and unplugged the cable. Stop clinging to that old phone. The internet was full of germs. You would get sick. Ader was amused by his words. Grandpa, that was virtual virus. It did not spread. He even wanted to create a social media account for Paul so he could make more friends. But Paul rejected it with a look of disgust. I did not need that thing. Raya still held a grudge about being forbidden to smoke. She deliberately went against Paul in everything. When Paul asked her to help feed the chickens, she either spilled feed everywhere or hid in her room, refusing to come out. Theo was quiet, but he always watched Paul from afar, afraid to get close. He could feel the distance that came from his grandfather. The kids were used to delivery food, internet, and convenient living. But Paul insisted on a farming life that followed sunrise and sunset. He thought young people were too restless and did not understand the meaning of life. The kids thought Paul was old-fashioned, stubborn, and behind the times. Until the day their mother's video call broke the stalemate. In the video, their mother had red eyes and scolded Raya and Ader for being rude to their grandfather. When they saw the guilt in their mother's eyes, Raya and Ader finally quieted down. They did not say anything, but they began to reflect on their behavior. The next day, Raya asked their grandmother to take them to town. The town market was lively and bustling. Fruit vendors shouted to attract customers. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted through the air. Elders sat on benches chatting. Children ran and played in the square. As Raya watched the peaceful and pleasant scene, the irritation in her heart slowly faded. She picked a straw hat from a hat shop for her grandmother. Ader met two local girls at the market. They took him to the river to fish and pick wild fruit. He experienced a kind of happiness he had never felt before. Raya was attracted by the handsome owner of the town pizza shop. The owner warmly invited her to come eat pizza next time. Raya's cheeks turned slightly red as she nodded. Life in the small town began to soften the children's prejudice toward the place. After returning home, Raya asked her grandmother about her grandfather's past. Her grandmother sat in the wicker chair in the yard with a sweet smile. Your grandpa was not like he is now when he was young. She told Raya that Paul had been a passionate, free-spirited hippie. He once took her on a motorcycle and traveled through 44 countries. They went to snowy mountains, crossed deserts, and saw the ocean, leaving countless beautiful memories. As she spoke, she took out the photo album she had treasured for many years. The photos recorded their journeys when they were young. Paul wore floral shirts and sunglasses while riding a motorcycle with a carefree smile on his face. His wife leaned against him with eyes filled with happiness. Raya and Ader looked at the photos in astonishment. They had never imagined that their strict and stubborn grandfather had once been so free-spirited. Then why did Grandpa decide to settle here? Raya asked. Her grandmother's smile faded, and she let out a sigh. Because of your grandpa's younger brother. It turned out Paul had a close younger brother when he was young. They traveled and adventured together. But during one trip, his brother had a tragic accident and passed away at the scene. And it happened right in front of Paul's eyes. From that moment, Paul changed. He no longer sought excitement or longed for faraway places. He brought his wife to Provence, bought this olive farm, and lived a quiet life away from the world. Your grandpa had always felt guilty. He believed that if he had not suggested the trip, his brother would not have been hurt. Her voice trembled slightly. All these years he had put his whole heart into the olive trees. The olive trees were like his children, that their grandfather's coldness and stubbornness were just ways to hide his pain. And Theo became the key to breaking the distance between them. Unlike Raya and Ader, he was never rebellious, and always quietly observed Paul. Every day Paul went to work in the olive grove. Theo would follow behind him. He would watch his grandpa water the plants, trim the branches, and take care of the trees. One day, Paul noticed Theo behind him. He stopped working. He waved at Theo. Come here. Theo hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked to Paul's side. Paul showed him the chicken coop. He picked up a newly hatched chick. He placed it in Theo's palm. Theo's eyes lit up instantly. A bright smile appeared on his face. Paul then took him to see the rabbits. He taught him how to feed them. From that day on, Theo went to the olive grove with Paul every day. Paul taught him to recognize different plants. He told him how to tell when the olives were ripe. They picked ripe apricots together. He told Theo not to drink water after eating apricots. Otherwise, he would get a stomach ache. Theo remembered it carefully. One day, Grandma told Paul the town was holding a running of the Bulls Festival. She asked if he wanted to go, but Theo tugged at his hand, his eyes full of hope. Facing Theo's innocent look, Paul's heart softened. He nodded. All right, let's go to the running of the bulls. On the day of the festival, the town was packed with people. The atmosphere was full of excitement. Theo sat on Paul's shoulders happily. He watched the bulls run by. He waved his little hands in excitement. Paul held onto his legs tightly. A long-lost smile appeared on his face. It was the first time in years he felt such pure happiness. Meanwhile, Ade slowly blended into life here. He no longer held onto his phone all day. He learned cooking from Grandma. He swam in the river and explored the mountains with the local boys. He found life without the internet could be fun too. Ria often went to the pizza shop. She spent more and more time with the handsome owner. Paul noticed it and worried inside. He felt the pizza owner looked suspicious, but Ria refused to listen. Until one day, Ade saw the pizza owner being close with another woman. Ria could not believe it, but he brushed it off, saying she was just a friend. Ria felt sad, but she still chose to believe him. It was her first crush. She did not want to let it go. Paul's olive grove was his life's dedication. For 20 years, he took care of each olive tree with great effort. From watering and fertilizing to pruning and harvesting, he did everything himself. Grandma would sometimes joke, "You care more about these olive trees than you care about me." Paul would always smile and say nothing. He knew these trees were not just his work. They were his emotional anchor. Every year, he made olive oil from his own harvest. The output was small, but the quality was excellent. That year, he sent his olive oil to a competition. He was both excited and nervous. Day after day, the bond between him and the kids grew stronger. Ade helped Paul carry olives. Ria prepared hot tea for him. Theo stayed by his side every day. Paul slowly opened his heart. He talked more with the kids. He told them stories about his past travels. He taught them how to grow olive trees. He shared fun stories from the town. The kids grew to love their strict, yet warm-hearted grandpa. They found out, even though he seemed stubborn, he was kind. Even though he did not talk much, he showed his love through actions. One day, the mailman brought a letter. Paul felt uneasy when he saw the logo on the envelope. It was from the olive oil competition committee. He did not dare open it. He asked his wife to read it for him. She opened the letter. A surprised smile appeared on her face. Paul, our olive oil won first place. Paul froze. Then tears welled up in his eyes. 20 years of hard work finally received recognition. He held the letter and walked quickly toward the olive grove. He looked at the hills full of olive trees and whispered to himself, I knew it. You were the best. Theo followed behind him. He could not hear what his grandpa said, but he could feel his joy. To celebrate the good news, Paul hosted a big feast. He invited neighbors and friends from the town. At the feast, everyone raised their glasses to celebrate. They praised Paul's olive oil for its rich flavor. Paul looked at the lively scene in front of him. He looked at the kids, smiling happily, and felt warmth in his heart. He suddenly thought of his daughter and asked his wife, Did you tell our daughter the good news? His wife shook her head. Because of the time difference, it was the middle of the night for her. We can tell her tomorrow. Paul's eyes dimmed a little. He always missed the daughter who had been away for 17 years. Just then Paul saw Leah walking again with the pizza shop owner. He frowned and walked over quickly. He grabbed Leah and said, If you go with him, it will not end well. Leah shook off his hand. Grandpa, do not control my life. The pizza shop owner stepped forward and looked at Paul with attitude. Paul lost his temper and argued with him. The argument became more heated. In a moment of anger, Paul slapped Leah. Leah froze. Her eyes were full of shock and hurt. She cried and ran off with the pizza shop owner. She did not come home again that night. Grandma called her, but she refused to answer. Paul and his wife worried the whole night. Early the next morning, Leah finally called. Her voice was hoarse as she said she was at the beach. Grandma rushed there with Paul. But when they arrived, they only found the pizza shop owner. Paul asked where Leah was. The man stuttered and could not give a clear answer. He finally found Leah near the rocks by the shore. She was curled up unconscious. Paul held her with a breaking heart. He rushed her home for help. The doctor examined her. Luckily, she was safe because they found her in time. Paul was also tearing up. He knew he was responsible too. If he had talked to her earlier instead of scolding and blocking her, maybe none of this would have happened. He feared Leah would repeat her mother's mistake, ruining her life in a moment of impulse. When Leah woke up, she was very depressed. Paul did not blame her. He simply took care of her quietly. One day, Paul brought Leah to the lake. He took out a coin from his pocket and handed it to her. Throw it into the lake and make a wish. All the bad things will pass. Leah looked at Paul with mixed feelings. Grandpa, I am sorry. Leah choked as she spoke. I should have listened to you. In that moment, the last barrier between them disappeared. Leah's experience made Paul realize his health was getting worse. To protect the kids better, he decided to quit drinking. The doctor told him to exercise more. Adele offered to help his grandpa exercise. He taught Paul fitness games. He took him cycling. At first, Paul was not used to these younger activities. But under Adel's patient guidance, he slowly began to enjoy exercising. Every morning they rode their bikes through the olive grove path, riding toward the sunrise, feeling the breeze. Their bond grew even stronger. Theo stayed by Paul's side as always. Their bond grew deeper. Paul took Theo to the town library. He read him storybooks. Theo used sign language to perform for Paul and make him laugh. Soon the day of the olive oil award ceremony arrived. Paul had to go to the city to attend. The kids took a handsome photo of him for the event promotion. He accepted the trophy and stood on the stage. He looked at the kids in the audience. He looked at friends and neighbors who came to congratulate him. His heart was full of emotions. The vacation was ending. The kids were returning to Paris. On the day of the farewell, Adele hugged Paul tightly. Grandpa, come live in Paris with us. Grandpa was used to this life. The slow pace, the familiar scenery, the kind neighbors, and the olive trees and old friends who had stayed with him for decades. All were part of his soul. He planned to stay in Provence for the rest of his life. Just then a familiar figure appeared at the station door. It was Paul's daughter, the mother of the kids. They had not seen each other for 17 years. She looked older. Her eyes were full of guilt. Paul saw her, and his expression became complex. There was blame, there was longing, and there was a hint of hope. She looked at her father. Her lips trembled. She could not find the words. Theo held his mother's hand and led her slowly toward Paul. Emotions tangled in that moment. Paul looked at his daughter. Memories flashed across his mind. He wanted to hug her, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. Leah, Adele, and Theo watched. Their hearts were touched deeply. In that moment, every barrier turned into tears and faded into the air. Paul hugged each of his grandchildren. He reminded them to study well, take care of themselves. In the end, the kids nodded.